Did you know Fender made a high gain amp back in the late 90s? Well, you're watching this video, so you already know what amp it is. This is the Fender Prosonic. The Fender Prosonic was Fender's answer to the high-gain boutique amp craze, with the 80s and the 90s. So they made this amp, which, as you can see, looks nothing very different from anything Fender has put out, like initially, right? Like, Fender fans will look at it and be like, well, I can tell all the differences. It's got the black panel. It's got the signature white script Prosonic on it. It's got 210s, like a Celestian variant that was specifically made for Fender. It was kind of like a custom shop creation of Bruce Zinke. I found a few dates for production, and it's mid 90s to like early to mid 2000s. And initially they were custom shop hand wired, and then they started getting more of a production line. These amps can be had for $700 to $1,500. I know it's a wide range. Some people don't realize that they're desired to a certain extent, and so they're letting them go cheap. Some people just want to get rid of them. They are heavy. We are church guitarists by trade predominantly, and they are known for a church called Bethel that uses them in combination with an AC30. I think they actually use like a 90s, early 2000s era AC30 with them. More on that in a second. And I always assumed it was just a cool, more full, I say more full, like as in not scooped, Fender amp that had a pretty decent edge of breakup sound. But in actuality, getting cleans out of this amp is kind of tough because you could switch tubes out if you want, which can kind of give you a little bit more room for cleans. But it's got this really cool sound for mixing with other amps. For some people, I would prefer it mixed together, but the more time I spent with it as we were capturing it and as we were setting up these presets, I really grew to appreciate it's kind of got a unique character. Fender amps, when driven, typically the older ones especially, are notorious for being just flubby, and there's not super desirable for a lot of people. The drive, some people like it, but it's not that tight sound that you've come to know from like Marshalls, or even Vox drive is a very different thing, but a Vox drive is more tight. It's not as flubby. The character of a Prosonic that's driven is pretty cool. And I've spent some time trying it through some different cabs, through like my aux box. That's the good way to kind of like get a good range of how an amp feels when we're trying to capture one profile and make presets. Get a good idea of how an amp responds and how it sounds. It's just trying it with different cabs. And I kept finding, I was like, okay, so these things are still the same. These things change a little bit different cabs. It opened up a bit more, got a little bit more headroom when you did like a 412, for example. I don't personally own a 412 cab. Brian does in his studio down in Alabama. And we just felt that like maybe this amp is just not well known. So we'll see. If there's enough of a desire for this amp to be put through a 412 and cranked, we could probably make that happen. But let me tell you what you are going to get through this pack. We really stretched this amp out and get a lot out of it for you guys. We hope you're going to enjoy it. You're hearing some sounds throughout this video of different ways we're utilizing it. We're using it clean. We're actually using it with an AC30 in stereo, and we're using it driven, which is pretty cool. You're going to get presets that are kind of our MO. We do like an A and a B variant. A is with 2 instances of the amp at the end of the chain in stereo, running all wet effects to the front, all effects into the front. And that's a real raunchy shoegaze sound kind of thing. That's what we tend to like to do when we play on Sundays at church as worship musicians. Then the B sound, the B patch, is with the amp in the middle of the chain and all stereo effects starting afterwards. That tends to give you this really clean and crisp wet effects section. It's really cool. Like your chorus is, if the chorus is after the amp, it's more defined, it's more crisp if you like that kind of thing. But you're also getting a third preset. You're getting what we're calling the AC Sonic. Like I mentioned, there's a church that does their own music, Bethel Music, and for a long while, I think maybe they've kind of come off of that. They don't do it quite. They're not as like consistent with using this combo nowadays. I'm not 100% sure, but they did for a long while use a Prosonic with an AC30 in stereo. And that's where I was like, okay, I can see why they liked it. It's a really cool sound. So what we have on that patch is 2 amps at the end of the chain, all wet effects into the front. Both the AC30 and the Prosonic are at the edge of breakup, and so together they give you a really wide image, and it almost can seem as though the amps aren't balanced, but what you're hearing is that the amps are just so different, so things are hitting differently. And what's cool about that is if you're running, like for example, Bethel runs 2 guitarists in stereo, well, I imagine what you may do is run one guitarist with their Vox on the left and the other guitarist with their Vox on the right. And then both of the Prosonics, for example, are in the middle. And so you kind of like, I don't know, I'm just speculating on how they mix them, but it kind of seems to make a little sense if you do that. But what you get is just this great, like, compressed, ripping sound that wet effects hit and get a little chewy like you want, but they also don't just get blitz to oblivion. So let me just give you an idea of how this amp is set up in the A preset with 2 instances at the end. It's got some character. So that's no effects. I'll put verb on. So we're doing like we normally do. You get a few flavors of drive. Because of how interesting this amp is, you're going to want to experiment with the drive choices. Like when we do the AC Sonic preset, those amps were ran considerably cleaner, and so you can get away with stacking more drive on that. There is it's a rat distortion in the Helix called the Ratatouille. I ran that lower gain, but because of the amps being cleaner and the Ratatouille being ran not quite as hard, it really sounds really good. But I also put a Timmy in there, and so the two together, like, you would not think you could stack 2 drives with a rat. Typically for me, like, a rat is a lot of distortion, and it's just more than I prefer. But the way it's set, it's a really cool sound. They get real raunchy in a good way. It's very usable. It gets, a lot of times, like I said, Fender amps can be known for having like a flubby overdrive, a flubby low end. This does that, but like in a very musical and texture-filled way. I really like it. So that's the A preset, and that's just some of the drives that we have going on there. Let me take you to the B preset real quick and show you what we got working here. We got 4 drives here as well. It's the same ones for this one, except we have an amp gain. So let me show you that. Ran this one, it's a little dirtier to begin with. Again, if you pick quietly though. Pick quietly, you're definitely getting clean. Which I would say is a good thing to work on as a guitarist, like to set your amp at right at edge of breakup or right at breakup, and use your right hand to really control dynamics. It sounds really nice. The amp reacts differently. But listen when I gain this up. I know it sounds kind of weird, but that makes me think Led Zeppelin. And I guess it's not too weird because he did use a telly for some of the tones that I think a lot of us assumed were like a Les Paul. I don't know. I don't play like Led Zeppelin, but something about the character of that tone. The B preset really surprised me. What about the AC30? This is actually our free AC30 that we give away for every unit. Anyways, if you have it, you have the same one. We just decided to go ahead and put it in this pack. So if you're getting like TONEX, for example, where you're just getting amps, you're going to have it, whether you download it, it's going to be the same thing. Now, if you're getting any of our presets that have these dialed in, like the AC Sonic preset with the effects and stuff, sure, there's some tweaks to it. Whether or not it's like the exact tweaks that we made to, you know, because our brains, we're probably going to set stuff up pretty similar. But we put the 2 amps together and made sure they balanced pretty well, but also gave a cool image. So that's what that is. This is our Korg era, the free AC30 that we included with it. When you get the Helix patch, the Fractal patches, you're getting the IRs, the tone match IRs that go with it. When you're getting quad Cortex, you're getting the captures, and same with TONEX when you're getting the captures for that AC30. Just so you can, right out the gate, try that combo, which we think is really cool. Like we said, honestly, if you want, and this is not a Bethel patch, I'll say that. Like, we dialed in effects kind of like how we typically do it. We did a little of like the cleans and stuff the way we hear them do it. I didn't spend a lot of time like hyper fixating on how they sound. I just went, this is what I know in my head that things genuinely kind of sound like, and kind of went for it, but also in a way that sounds like how Brian and I like to do things. If you really like the Bethel sound, if you really like how those guys set stuff up, they actually sell their own presets. Go check out Tone Factor, go check out David Hislop and Kenyon Reed. They have their own personal presets that they dialed in to sound like them. We just know these two amps have been said to sound great together. A great combo of amps is always known as like Deluxe Reverb and AC30. Prosonic and AC30 is another combo we hear thrown around. So we wanted to kind of like just put it in a patch and give you a little more value with this. But like Michael Pope, Bobby Strand, Jonathan Lee, Kenyon Reed, David Hislop, like these are some guys that we know have come through Bethel and have used that combo. So here is how that AC Sonic sounds just, you know, without like playing something. You heard a sample or two, you heard a few samples of it. So relatively clean, I know. If you set a Prosonic, like you got to get it to 2 for the amp to kind of like come alive. And even then it's not fully there, but there's still dirt in it. So if you take away too much, but if you run the AC30 a little cleaner, it kind of cleans the whole thing up. And then we ran a compressor. A compressor does a lot of great things. But one thing it's really good for is kind of like giving you more sustain from an amp that doesn't have much because you're trying to run it clean. So that's a nice little approach. Here's some verb on it. Then we have a Timmy, Kinkatone, and the Ratatouille. Listen to this. I told you it doesn't get as gnarly as you would think. Here it is with the Timmy. Gets a little more character, of course, in the drive. More drive, some mids. It kind of opens up, gets a little thicker. It's actually very pleasant. Nothing like out of the crazy ordinary with how they're set up and as far as the user is concerned, how you utilize them. But we wanted to give you 3 options to really hear how cool this amp is, because we think it kind of gets known as a one-trick pony. So here it is, 3 different ways: clean, gained up, in stereo with an AC30. You can grab them right now over at Signal Theory. Make sure you've subscribed if you haven't. This is a new venture. We're scooting things over. If you're coming from worship tutorials, we're scooting things over. If you're new over here, we make patches and captures and digital content for all the platforms, the big platforms, and we do gear demos, we do reviews of pedals, and we have fun doing random things like, hey, does a Samson era matchless HC30 really sound any different or better than a today model run C30? You can check that video out too. But stuff like that. So if you're new to the channel, welcome. Subscribe. Let us know what you think of this patch. We'll see you in the next one. We got a big one coming. Get ready. See ya.